pathogen was through the inner seal by the time I reached the command post. I could hear it. Not the organism itself, which had no sound, but the containment klaxon cycling on and off as the barrier readings dropped, and the silence underneath it where 63 research staff used to be. I am Res Corvon. I was the colony administrator of Verith Station, Moon Orvith 7. I say was, not because the station is gone, but because the person who sat in that chair before the humans came is not quite the same person who sat there after. Something shifted. I have not found the right word for it in any Gorathi dialect, and I have looked. We had been signaling the Coalition Relief Network for 11 hours. The Gorathi Colonial Authority acknowledged receipt and logged the pathogen event as priority secondary, which meant, in the language of the authority, that a response team would be dispatched within 30 standard days. The outer corridor populations had 6 hours of viable containment left. The inner ring had perhaps 14. I did not tell the surviving staff this. I told them the coalition was aware of our situation. Both statements were true. Only one of them was useful. It was our communications technician, a young female named Orvith Side of 20, called Savat, who found the Earth Auxiliary Channel. She had been running laterals on every registered relief frequency in the sector index. Old ones, dormant ones, formats that predated the current coalition structure by decades. The Earth listing appeared as a footnote in a Gorathi Colonial Survey appendix from 40 years ago, annotated simply, Emergency Consultation Services. Response not guaranteed. Savat flagged it and looked at me with the particular stillness of someone who knows they are proposing something undignified. I told her to send the request. We asked for one thing, a xenobiological consultant who could advise us remotely on pathogen suppression. The organism in question was a modified research strain, one of our own, created in Verith's lower laboratory as part of a 3-year tissue regeneration study. It had mutated outside parameters. It was dissolving the station's organic seal compounds, working inward, and nothing in our containment manual addressed to scenario in which the threat was our own science. We needed someone who had seen something like it. We needed a voice on a comm line, a set of expert eyes reviewing our data logs, a suggestion. That was the scope of what we asked. 40 minutes after Savet sent the request, human voice answered on the auxiliary channel. Not a recording. A live officer, calm and clear, identified himself as duty coordinator for the Earth Rapid Relief Authority and said he was logging our incident report. He asked 3 questions: pathogen classification, current barrier integrity, and colony population. I answered all 3. There was a pause of perhaps 8 seconds. Then he said, "We're routing a response. ETA to Orvith 7 is 4 hours and 20 minutes. Please keep this channel open." I asked him to confirm the nature of the response. I wanted to know if a consultant had been assigned, if we should expect a data link or a voice advisory session. He said, "I'll patch you the manifest when the convoy clears jump." I did not understand the word convoy. The manifest arrived 2 hours later. I read it 3 times. I called Savat over and had her read it. She read it once, set it down, and did not speak for a long moment. The Earth Rapid Relief Authority was dispatching the following to Verith Station, Moon Orvith 7. 1 8-person xenobiological containment engineering team with full portable barrier equipment rated for Class I modified organisms. 1 trauma surgical unit of 6, with field-grade equipment sufficient to operate on species across 14 biological classifications. 1 quarantine enforcement vessel, the ECS Ardent Margin, a mid-tonnage warship with containment ordnance, a biological isolation module, and standing orders to establish a cordon around the Moon's orbital approach until the pathogen event was resolved. Total personnel inbound, 41. Total vessels, 4. We had asked for 1 voice on a comm line. I went to the cracked observation dome on the station's upper level because I needed to see them arrive. The dome had taken stress fractures in the 3rd hour of the pathogen event, when a sublevel pressure differential vented upward through a compromised section of the east corridor. The cracks ran from the lower left quadrant of the dome up and to the right, a pattern that reminded me, in the strange dissociative way of exhausted minds, of a lightning strike preserved in glass. At the edge of the fracture line, and watched the approach window. They came out of transit in formation. The 4 ships together, The warship to the port side and slightly ahead of the 3 relief vessels. Everything running lit. Running lights on. Work lights on. The biological isolation module on the EC's ardent margin already cycling its exterior indicators in yellow. They were not sneaking up on anything. They were announcing themselves. Here is the help. Here is what we sent. The lead vessels began its descent to the landing pad in the south quadrant. Within 6 minutes of orbital insertion, I watched it come down. A broad, flat-bellied transport. It lit with work floods that turned the dust of Orvith 7's surface into a pale, rolling fog. The ramp was down before it had fully settled. The containment engineers came off at a walk, not a run, in sealed environment suits the color of pale stone, carrying equipment cases that 2 of them handled together. They moved like people who had done this before. They moved like the 41 minutes of transit between receiving our manifest and landing on our moon had been sufficient time to know exactly what they were walking into. The team lead, a human woman, broad through the shoulders, with a voice that came through my suit comm in clean, unaccented Gorathi trade dialect, identified herself as Senior Engineer Voss and asked me to show her the barrier schematic. I showed her. She looked at it for perhaps 4 seconds. Then she said, "We'll work from the east breach first. The sub-level pressure differential is your fastest moving problem. After that, the inner ring. We'll have a stable cordon inside 6 hours. 6 hours. The coalition had given me 30 days, I said. We asked only for a consultant. She looked at me. I could see her face through the visor, calm, not unkind, and she said, I know, but your readings put this at a Class AVI modified event. We don't send a voice on a comm line for Class I. I did not have an answer for that. I followed her inside. What came next I will not narrate in full, because the incident log contains all of it, and the incident log does not lie. What I will say is this. The humans worked in shifts. They did not stop. The surgical team established a triage station in the Central Commons and worked through our wounded, 14 staff with varying degrees of pathogen exposure, with a focus and a competence that I found in my exhausted state almost painful to observe. They did not ask which injuries were worth treating. They treated everything. One of the surgeons, a thin human male who could not have been far past his training, sat on the floor next to a Gorathi researcher named Vel Orith Sen for the better part of an hour, monitoring her breathing because her case was stable but not safe, and he did not want her to be alone if it shifted. Orith Sen survived. They all survived. 14 treated, 14 walking out of that commons under their own power 2 days later. Senior Engineer Voss had the east breach sealed in 4 hours, not 6. The inner ring containment was rebuilt to Class 4, standard, by hour 9. The ECS Ardent Margin maintained orbital cordon throughout and departed last, only after Voss filed a formal clearance report with the Earth Relief Authority and copied it to the Gorathi Colonial Authority, who, I note, had not yet dispatched their initial response team. The humans did not celebrate when the work was finished. They packed their equipment into the same cases they had arrived with, loaded the transport, and told me the colony was clear. Voss shook my hand in the human fashion. 4 fingers wrapped around 2 of my outer plating ridges, a grip she had clearly been taught, because she applied it correctly, and said, "You're going to want to review your research containment protocols. Stage-modified strains need a different barrier rating." I told her I would review them. She said, "Good," and walked up the ramp. I stood on the landing pad and watched the 4 ships lift. They went up clean, the warship swinging wide to clear the atmosphere first, 3 relief vessels following in the same formation they had arrived in. Running lights still on, still announcing themselves, still saying, "Here is what we sent, here is what we did, here is us leaving because the work is done," and that is all it ever was. Went inside and opened the incident log. I sat for a long time before I typed the final entry. The standard fields were easy: pathogen class, containment outcome, personnel status, date of resolution. But the log has a remarks field, and the remarks field was empty, and I found that I could not leave it empty. Not for this, I wrote, 41 humans responded to a request for one. I have reviewed every clause of the Gorathi Colonial Survey Appendix. There is no provision for this. I do not believe they needed one.